Hey, so we are continuing our sermon series called Revealing True Power, going through the Gospel of Mark. And today is all about my favorite section of Mark. Like, I love this section. Like, I if you haven't noticed yet, I only have like a couple of stories, truly. And in the confession, I don't spend as much time on that as I spend on the sermons. And some of you are like, it's obvious. And so when we're doing it, we talk about this section of the scriptures a lot of what we're talking about here. And so our section of scriptures today is the ending of chapter 8 of Mark on into 9. And it kind of ends on where the gospel reading was today. And that first section that we're talking about today, at the ending of chapter 8, is Peter's confession that Jesus is the Christ. Oh, huge deal. And Peter, he declares that Jesus is the Christ. Yay! And then Jesus calls him Satan. Oh, man. And then right after that, we have the transfiguration, which I have to admit, I was in seminary before I realized what the transfiguration was. Listen, I'm not that intelligent. I don't say I am, all right? But the transfiguration, some of you are like, I don't know what it is either. You're going to know what it is by the end of today. And so the transfiguration where Jesus becomes all bright and shiny and God says, this is my son. And then after that, you get our gospel lesson. So of the father who brings his son to the disciples to cast out a demon, and they can't do it, and it takes prayer. Those are the three stories: Peter confessing Jesus, transfiguration, the failure to exorcise the demons, right? Like those are the three things. And this is why we're talking about getting things wrong and buying your wife a vacuum cleaner for Valentine's Day. Like sometimes we get it all right, but it was wrong at the same time, because the disciples, they have seen so many amazing things. They've seen Jesus feed 4,000 and 5,000 people. He's driven out demons. He's brought on healings. He's restored eyesight, brought opened deaf ears. Like, Jesus is amazing. And people are starting to realize that this guy here in the gospel at this point is really special, that he's amazing, but they're also understanding things and kind of not all correct at the same time. And we see that here because Jesus asks his disciples this. He goes, who do people say that I am? And they say, well, some say that you're John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others one of the prophets. And he asks them, well, then who do you say that I am? And Peter, Peter did all this, right? He's like, I got this one. Like, you are the Christ, right? You are it. You are the Christ over there. And Jesus is like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I am the Christ. Now, first off, like, this is all great, but Mark is dropping hints for us as to how we're supposed to read this section, right? We're supposed to read this. So whenever you see a location marked and it tells a specific location, that should send up a signal to us that we should be thinking a certain way, all right? So we saw this a few weeks ago with the Syrophoenician woman. We're supposed to be reminded of Jezebel then, right? Like, so it's like, ooh, boo, hiss, Jezebel. Like that's what it's kind of doing that. Well, it tells them where we are. We're in Caesarea Philippi. Here's a photograph of what it looked like at the time. And we're in Caesarea Philippi. Now, let me find out if you guys are smarter than me, all right? What is important about Caesarea Philippi? It's right there in the name. What's important? Caesar. You guys I had to look that up. Like, I was like, well, this has got to be important. I looked it up. I was like, oh, it's Caesar Philippi. It's Caesarea. And it's not named after the salad. Some of you are thinking about lunch already. Like, it's Caesar's. Like, this town was created by this guy named Philip. He's got prideful, like that's, and Herod the Great in honor of Caesar. So this is Caesarea Philippi, right? Like, so it's over there. So we should also be thinking about Caesar and like the whole thing going on Caesar. So they're in this town that was dedicated. There is a temple in this town devoted to emperor worship. Okay? All right. So get over here. Then we have this. Now, does this, some told him John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others one of the prophets. Does this sound familiar to anyone else? This was said at another time in the Gospel of Mark. Does anyone remember where that was? You don't have to give me book, chapter, verse. Just what it was around. It's around King Herod, right? It's around King Herod's time. And King Herod, remember when we talked about King Herod a few weeks ago and how he beheaded John the Baptist, and that kind of showed that Herod was just this feckless leader? It's the same thing. It's the same place. So we look over here, this one over to the right is the older one, the one from Mark chapter 6. It says, King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become well known. And some said that he was John the Baptist, raised from the dead. That's why these miraculous powers at work with him. Others said he's Elijah, and others said that he's a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. So you see what Mark is laying all these hints down, saying, hey, we should be thinking about this guy. The disciples are thinking of this guy in the same terms as Caesar and Herod. And then for those of you, I'm not going to go into this, but for some of you guys like this, there's also undertones of the Maccabees revolt that are being said under all of this. Some of you know what that means. It's the beginning of Hanukkah. It's also Palm Sunday. The Maccabees were this revolutionary bunch that kicked the Greeks out of Jerusalem, right? So all three of those things are meaning there. So when Jesus is asking, who do people say that I am? And Peter is like, Peter's like, oh yeah, you're the Christ. Mark is going, what's Peter thinking of? He's not Christ like Christ kind of how we understand it. He's Christ like, you're going to overthrow Caesar. You're going to be like a Caesar. You're going to be like a king. You're going to be this big revolutionary one that's finally going to be able to kick Rome out, lead the insurrection that saves his people, right? Like that is what they are thinking. And then Jesus says, yeah, well, I'm going to die. And then I'm going to rise again. And Peter here's like, you're going to die? You're not going to die. You're the Christ. I just said it. You gave me 3 stars because I said that, Jesus. Like you can't just say that you're going to die if you're going to be the Christ that's in my mind. And Peter takes Jesus like, you're not going to do this. He chastises him. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Whoa, right? Like when Jesus is calling you Satan, probably not the best time in your day, right? But that's what happens here. And we see that Peter and the disciples, they're right about Jesus, he's the Christ. But at the same time, they're wrong. You see that? Doing to the very next story, it's the transfiguration. It's when Jesus becomes all bright and shiny, glory on high, and it's great. But and what Jesus does is he takes 3 of the disciples, Peter, James, and John, up to the top of this mountain, and Moses and Elijah show up. Let's actually read this real quick. He led them up onto a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely white. See? And no one on earth could bleach them that white. And there appeared with him Elijah and Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. Oh, this is a huge deal, massive deal. Yes, the disciples know that Jesus is special, but now they see him in this kind of spiritual way. It's like, oh my goodness, he's going to be Christ kind of head over everything. He's going to be the spiritual Messiah too. I mean, can you imagine how exciting they would have been? If we just step our toes into Moses' sandals for just a little bit, we will see, can you imagine how excited? Because, think about when Moses would see, names, Chris. When Peter would see Moses, right? And because constantly growing up hearing all the stories of the Exodus, of how Moses climbed up that mountain of God and came down with the 10 Commandments, with the law. That same law that Peter would have memorized as he was coming up and becoming a man. And here Moses is talking with Jesus face to face. Perhaps I can get his autograph, right? He's right there. And then He's reminded of the prophets as he looks at Elijah. He's reminded of Jeremiah and Isaiah, Malachi, and all these prophets and how God has called them. And he remembers how Elijah ascended the mountain of God and was able to defeat the prophets of Baal. Oh man, maybe I can get him to sign one of my scrolls. And then Peter says this. And this, so it's a common held belief, and I think this, so it's correct, just so that you guys know. It's a common held belief that the Gospel of Mark is actually Peter's gospel. Okay? Like Peter's gospel, that he was kind of dictating his stories to Mark, the gospel writer. And so he's kind of dictating there. And I think this kind of shows why we think that. I think because what Peter does next, he sees the glory of Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. And he's all bright and shiny. And Peter just so filled with spit and vinegar, I don't know, like so filled with it that he yells out, "Oh man, it's so good that we're here. We need to build 3 booths." I think we could understand it as churches today. We need to build 3 churches. One for you, Jesus, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And I think we can tell that this is Peter writing because there's the most like facepalm moment. You could tell that as Peter is dictating the story, that his hand is like this. He's like, oh no, because he says this. He goes, but he didn't know what to say because they were scared. You know? It's like he's hedging. He's like, don't go do likewise on that, fellas and ladies. Don't do it. Like, Peter didn't know what he was talking about when he said that. He understands who Jesus is, but he just doesn't know completely. And then God from the midst of the clouds, all this Exodus imagery again, God from the midst of the clouds just comes in. He says, "This is my son. Listen to him." Like just incredible image after incredible image. They know who God is. They know how important Jesus is. They've physically heard the voice of God in the cloud. They know that Jesus is the one, the true Christ, the Son of God. They know and have all the faith in who he is. They just don't seem to understand it. They know that Jesus is going to be king. But is it really going to be one like they think, like one like Caesar or Herod? They know that Jesus is going to be a prophet. But is he really going to be like an religious elite, one that wears these white robes in public? And so, I mean, no. One like the Pharisees who devour widows' offerings? Oh, we're not there yet. That's coming up. They know that Jesus is God, but they still kind of don't understand what that means. And this affects them in such a profound way. It affects them at how they do everything. Because as we continue with the story here, we get to our reading, what I read just a little bit ago. There's all this commotion all around. All this commotion, people coming up to Jesus and the disciples wanting to be healed and blessed. And you get a sense from the scriptures that the disciples have really started to bend into their role as like the dudes with Jesus, right? They're like, yeah, this is what we do now. Let's bring on the folks. Let's do all the healings and stuff like that. It's like, you be healed, right? Like doing all the thing like Steve Martin in that one movie. I don't know. They're doing all the stuff. You kind of get that sense to them. And then all of a sudden this one guy comes up with his son that is possessed by this demon. And he comes up, he's like, can someone heal my son? And you know Peter's like, yeah, I can do it. I'm the best here anyway. I got this. And he comes on, he's like, bring him on over here. He's like, like let's go. And he says the magic words, the words that have been working all along. After all, Jesus commissioned them just a few chapters before to get rid of demons and do all these things to tell about the Christ. He can do it now too. And he's like, all right, bring him in. And he's like, says the magic words and nothing. He's like, oh, well, maybe we didn't do this enough, you know? we got to count to 3 before we do it. And then like he puts it on his head extra, nothing. He spits on his hand. This is all, I'm reading into this, and nothing works. And you can imagine over and over and over again that maybe this demon's even mocking them. And despite all their efforts, nothing can be done. They knew the power of Jesus. They knew what it was, yet they had it all wrong. When we were writing this sermon, I was like, oh my gosh, here it is right here. Because I understand that. I feel that in my own life. I feel that in so many of your other lives too. When you come and talk to me, or when you're talking about things, because it seems like it's like, oh, I know, understand, and say all the correct things about this Jesus, who's the Christ. And yet, I still struggle. Like, I think an easy one to pick on, because we struggle with it all so much, is marriages. Like, we've read all the books, we've tried to be like Jesus in our marriage, and yet it falls apart. Or maybe it's your career, your vocation, right? You've read all the books. Here's how to be a servant, just like Jesus. But still you struggle. No one is respecting you, and your career's on the line. Or it's your family. This is the one I hear the most. You knew Jesus growing up. You brought your kids to Sunday school, confirmation, had them sing in the children's choir, play all the things, go all the youth group functions, do all these different things. And now, at least your view of it is they're floundering in their faith. And you're like, what did I do wrong? I did all the right things. And I think in those moments of failure, it could be anything, we're forced to stare at the failure in the face. What did I get wrong about Jesus? I think in a certain sense, in that staring in our own failures, almost like we're staring at the cross a little bit. It's like, what did I get wrong? And it's almost like Peter is saying with us that after he said about the booths, he's like, and I think we understand what he's saying. It's like, we didn't know what we're talking about then. We thought we had all the answers. And the disciples, they couldn't do it. They couldn't cast out the demon out of the child. And Jesus ends up casting the demon out of him. And there's something very interesting right here. And if you're following along with the reading, it's kind of near the end. It says that Jesus cast out the demon, and there's all this hubbub about all of that. And then it appears like the child is like a corpse. And Jesus raises him from the dead. And I think in this moment, and Mark does this so much, he's winking at us in the way he writes. He's like, you see that child that looks like he's dead? And everyone's going, oh, he's dead. And Jesus raised him again. He goes, I'm winking, if you guys can't tell. Like, you see it? It looks like the story that's coming forward. You see it? It's there. And he raises the boy up. And the disciples afterwards, their belts are a little lower than they were before. And they come up to Jesus and they're like, well, Jesus, why couldn't we do it? We've done it so many times before. Why couldn't we do it? And Jesus says this, and this is the point. This one can only be cast out with prayer. I think the disciples have been doing everything but that, right? They're like, we know Jesus and the power that he gives us. He's going to give us the government that we deserve, right? He's going to kick out all the baddies. And we will finally be able to live in the glory, hallelujah, right? Like we have that sense to us. And yet, they know that that's the case, but they're not seeing it. Jesus says it comes in prayer. Think about that prayer for just a second and what that means. I think prayer means saying, not my will, but yours, God. It's saying, God, this road may be difficult that I'm on and I may not understand it, but still I will follow. It's a place of humbleness. It's a place of humble faith. And it turns away from ourselves and what we know and back to Jesus in his way. And this is when we were getting ready and writing this sermon, this is when I saw something I'd never seen before, and I want to tell you about it. Because when Jesus says it has to be done with prayer, it immediately made my imagination go wild. And I thought about the rest of Jesus' ministry here on earth before he dies and how prayer plays into it. And my mind immediately went to the Garden of Gethsemane. The Garden of Gethsemane, where before all those chief priests and all of those Roman officials, including Pilate, those are the disciples, and we often want to make Jesus into this too, that they thought that Christ meant their type of power. That before they arrested him and threw him onto a cross, all abandoned, Jesus was in the garden with his disciples who can't even stay awake, and he's praying. And do you remember what he prayed? Father, take this cup from me. A prayer that as we think about our marriages, our careers, our own children, or whatever thing, I think is one we prayed a lot. Take this cup from me, but not my will, but yours. You see, I think when Jesus said this one has to come out with a lot of prayer, I think he's also talking about our sinful conditions that we all have. That the beginning of the cross and the season of the passion and those weeks that led him to the cross are begun with prayer, not just for himself, but for us, that we might be delivered by them all on the cross. And that when we realize that this thought of that Father, when Jesus said, you got to believe to his son that had that demon in him, he said, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Jesus dies and rises again for us. He rises for all of those who don't actually get it right. Those of us who abandon Jesus and we end up just getting it wrong. He's humbly saving us. So, let's turn to Jesus in all humbleness and prayer. Even when you are prideful and you're like, I got all the answers. But also even when you know that you're wrong. And know that his deep love is for you and that he's saved you. Have peace, everybody. God loves you. And let's say a prayer. Jesus, we thank you that you love us so much and that you're with us. Lord, be with our hearts and soften them, even in matters of faith, that we may be able to constantly see how you are loving us and bringing us to salvation. Thank you, Jesus, for loving us and give us a heart for all those around us. Amen.